Well, it finally happened. Recently, Kagurabachi has passed the 100 chapter mark. Now, big congrats to Hokuzono and the other publishers for that such an accomplishment, but unfortunately, we're not going to be talking about the newest chapters today. Now, I've already made 2 other videos glazing Kagurabachi and talking about how underrated it is. And it feels kind of weird because I don't know if I can really say it's underrated nowadays. Like, it's getting all the love from Jump and getting all the cover pages and all. It's gonna be one of the big dogs of Jump going forward for sure. And to think it does not even have an anime adaptation yet. Soon, but not yet. Now, in those previous videos, I covered the introductory Sojo arc as well as the follow-up Raikuzachi auction arc. Which brings us to the current and still ongoing arc, the Sword Bearer assassination. Now, the problem is, it's already been an enormously huge arc. Like, it's longer than the first 2 arcs combined, and it's still going. So I'm not going to talk about everything. I'm gonna split it up. There's like a part kind of in the 80s, around chapter 80 or so, that gives us a nice little clean break before we go into another crazy section of the story. So for those following along, this video is going to be covering chapters 45 to 86. And I'll talk about the latest batch of chapters in a later time once we've hopefully get a little bit more of a resolution to the current ongoing events. So there will be full spoilers in effect. And I just gotta say, if you haven't read Kagurabachi yet, what are you even doing? Do yourself a favor, pause this video, go binge the series, at least up to chapter 86, and then come back. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's get into what is probably my favorite stretch of Kagurabachi so far.
I'll make you pay.
Back at the end of the Raikuzachi auction, the Kamunabi did manage to walk away with possession of the Magatsumi, the greatest of all the enchanted blades. The only problem is, because that blade has been sealed, it's not really useful for anything yet. And you got the Hishaku, a bunch of powerful sorcerers, really wanting to get that Magatsumi for their own. They seem to have a vendetta against all of this enchanted blade wielder, so if you are contracted to one of the blades, your life's in danger. So the idea that our heroes come up with is they're going to take Chihiro and his friends. They're going to go kind of act as bodyguards for some of the sword bearers who are now being targeted by various assassins, so that the Hishaku can break the contracts and then claim the enchanted blades for themselves. And they intend to do this by having our boy Hakuri form little bonds with his special ability, and then once he's able to do that, he's able to like transport the blades and the users kind of in and out of his little storehouse. It's complicated, but like once Hakuri's there, everything will come together. So what this has us doing is we have Chihiro, we have Hakuri. They are off to this temple to meet up with a sword bearer named Raha, who is currently under attack by the Hishaku. Now, can I just say, I do like Iruha. He's like kind of depressed when we first meet him. He's like, man, ever since the war ended, I've just kind of been chilling, doing absolutely nothing. And then a couple of my friends died as a result. Life kind of sucks right now. But then we get this moment where he meets Chihiro and he's like, your dad was who? Excuse me? Your dad was the one that made the enchanted blades? You might be my best friend now. And then one of the things I really did like about us kind of getting introduced to Ruha is because he is an enchanted blade bearer, by who he's been separated from the blade. So he technically doesn't have any powers right now. Once upon a time, he did have access to sorcery powers, but once you get that bond with an enchanted blade, you lose your access to your sorcery. Because you're only supposed to be able to use the enchanted blade's abilities. But like once you lose the enchanted blade, but you still have that contract, you're kind of just left with nothing. So like that's an interesting little wrinkle in the power system that we get introduced to here. And it does become very important later on. Because the implication of that is, well, if you happen to break that Enchanted Blade contract, you could theoretically get your powers back, the original ones. So we'll see where that goes. But this leads us to a scenario where you have Chihiro, Hakuri, and Ruha kind of on the run from the Hishaku, but they do eventually run into a group of Hishaku assassins led by the maniacal Hirohiko. And oh god, this kid, this guy, I don't even know how old he is. I think he's around Chihiro's age. He's batshit insane. You ever look into the eyes of someone and just think that person is crazy? That's Hirohiko in a nutshell. We do get a little bit of his backstory. Like, apparently he had been like killing people since he was the age of 3, and so like he doesn't view other people as like people. He views them as objects. Like, there's like a really deep psychological messed up personality to him, but it comes off as very playful in a weird way. Like, if this guy was actually real, he'd be one of the scariest serial killers of all time. Because this is a fun little like fictional story, he comes off as kind of like a playful antithesis to Chihiro. See, like when these two meet, Hirohiko is just like, I just want to have fun. I want to cause a lot of bloodshed. I just want to, do all sorts of cool shit. And then Chihiro's like, you're killing people. Let's not do that. So he tries his hardest to minimize the casualties when the two of them are fighting, and that's kind of where the main struggle comes, when him trying to minimize people getting caught in the crossfire while still trying to make sure Uruha and his Hakuri get saved. It really works for me because in this portion of the story, Chihiro's kind of struggling with his own image. Like, people kind of perceive him as being a monster, right? Like, he's been out in public killing people. Like, we know like the people he's killing they're up to no good, and they're trying to stop him. But for the general public, he's like, oh well, this dude with a sword just shows up and starts cutting people down. He's kind of a monster. And so every time he runs into Hirohiko, he's like, this is kind of how people are perceiving me. They perceive me as a monster like this guy, but he knows that's not what his actual intentions are. But he's trying to find a way to really kind of like present that, like he's trying to become more of a guardian figure rather than this monster that kills people. But then this is when we get introduced to another sword bearer. We get Hakuri and Ruha. They kind of go off on their own while Chihiro's fighting Hirohiko. And this is where we run into, do I say it? I think I'll say it. My favorite character in all of Kagurabachi. This here is Seiichi Samura. And my god, do I love him. So to get the obvious out of the way, he is a blind man. He is a blind swordsman. And don't you forget, he won't let you forget that, because one of my favorite aspects of his character is the fact that despite being blind, he makes all of these jokes about like seeing people. He's like, he'll like run into somebody like, oh, Ruha, man, I'm so happy to see you. Or, oh my god, like, you're looking great. And people are just like, bro, you're blind. Like, why do you keep talking about seeing people? And for some reason, it's never not funny. I don't know, maybe I just have an off sense of humor, but every time he says something about seeing someone, and it's like, yeah. Now, being a blind swordsman, Samura does kind of have the stereotypical attributes of a blind swordsman, where it's like, yeah, he might not be able to see, but he has like enhanced hearing, enhanced smell. He can like almost use his like the spiritual power from the enchanted blades to like sense other people. So like that's how he's able to navigate through these fights that he gets into. But man, like every time it's just like heckin' entertaining. And they kind of also like really dive into like his lack of sight. It makes him a terrifying fighter because he attacks on like movement and sound. It doesn't matter who you are. Like, if you get in a fight around him and he senses the wrong type of intentions, you're done. But we do start to dive into his character a little bit here. We learn that he did actually meet Chihiro a number of years ago, shortly after the passing of Chihiro's father, Kunishige. And he kind of acted as like a mentor type figure to Chihiro. He actually taught him some of the basics of swordsmanship. Kind of there for him somewhat during a particularly tough part of Chihiro's life. We dive a little bit into his relationship with the other sword bearers. It is important to remember that they were soldiers, all right? They were there during the Seitei War. They stood by each other. They were like comrades. They had each other's back. The six of them, six, seven. And then there's also this group of ninja that act as like his own personal bodyguards called the Masumi. We do get a little bit more into their characters later on, but all three of them are very unique. They have fun personalities, very welcome additions to the crew as well. So then it just makes the upcoming bombshell that Samura, he's a bit of a traitor. He's actually working with the Hishaku. It just makes that hurt all the more to see him betray these people that we have come to like. Now, when we do learn more about why Samura decided to align with the Hishaku, his reasons for doing so, it does make a lot of sense. But I'm going to touch on that a little bit later because it does tie into another character that we get introduced to later. But first, we kind of need to talk about the fact that the main character dies. Okay, well, obviously Chihiro doesn't die for good, but like technically he does die because we learn that through this death and then like almost instant resurrection, he does have his enchantment hit. His contract with the enchanted blade is broken. Chihiro is given an opportunity to walk away from all of the conflict, but he refuses. Like, we're at this point where all hope seems lost. Like, Chihiro he died, came back. Hakuri is sitting in a hospital bed with potential brain damage. Aruha also supposedly dies. You know, that's messed up. Samura ends up going rogue and is like working with the Hishaku in an attempt to eliminate the other sword bearers so that he can eventually like eliminate the enchanted blades once and for all. Like, things are not looking great. But it turns out there is a bit of a contingency plan just for the type of scenario we have here with Samura going rogue, and it leads to some pretty cool stuff. Years ago, the Masumi carried out a covert operation. They were tasked with eliminating the identity of one Iori Samura, the daughter of Seiichi Samura. She had a seal placed on her that would eliminate all of her memories of her previous life so that she could go and live a relatively normal life away from all the chaos of sorcery and enchanted blades. But now that things have gotten kind of dire and people are needing to gain leverage over Samura before things get too bad, she's coming back into play against her own will. So because Samura is the biggest threat to every party right now, the Masumi become a pretty integral part of the group. Since they are trained in ninja, they specifically have a type of combat style that can work against Samura, and the fact that he's blind and is on it, he relies on noise and senses to fight people. So they and Chihiro, they team up and they go off to find this Iori girl who's currently just hanging out at school. At this point, we also get introduced to two more Hishaku members. We have Todo, who's kind of a like level-headed, no nonsense type of girl. She's pretty hilarious, the way she sarcastically responds to all the other crazy stuff happening. And then we have Kaguri, who he's like a disciple of the blade. He's like, oh yeah, he takes swordsmanship very seriously. He has been trained for years and years to become a potential new enchanted blade bearer, and his time is almost here. It's almost time for him to become that guy. He's itching for every opportunity to prove himself. So we run into a very opportune encounter here where Chihiro has lost his ability to use an enchanted blade. He's now having to resort to just his own base level swordsmanship. He doesn't have all the magical powers to come with the enchanted blade. And he's going up against this Kaguri guy who is trying to become an enchanted blade user, but in the meantime, he's having to just perfect his own swordsmanship, trying to actually get the base mechanics down. And the two of them have these like very different approaches to swordsmanship, and they're having to kind of like learn off of each other and try to try to both improve in this fight that they get into. But I really like the development that Chihiro goes to this point. Like, it is true that up until this point, he has been relying very heavily on the abilities of N10, and now that he doesn't have it, he's realizing he really isn't that guy. All of the other swordsmen that he's run up against have been very experienced like masters of the sword, and they're very strong and like deadly without sorcerer powers. So Chihiro's trying to catch up to them so that should the time comes when he chooses to take N10 back, he will actually be able to make good use of the huge power boost that he gets from N10. We get this really fantastic moment in the fight against Chihiro and Kugari where Chihiro is like really trying to muster up some sort of strategies so that he can like at least keep up with this guy that's already very experienced with the sword. And it leads to this incredible moment where Chihiro uses his innate ability, his innate talent for like imitating and copying other people's techniques. And he remembers watching Samura do this certain sword technique, right? That allowed him to get really fast. And so Chihiro, he whips it out and just blows Kugari's mind. He's like, oh my god, you just performed the EI White Purity style. There's literally only two or three people alive that know how to do that. How the heck did you pull that off? Like, the moment is so cool. I love the EI White Purity style, the way it's drawn and depicted with like the unique pulling the sword out of the hilt in a very unique way that allows the user to get like a super speed boost. It's just the kind of stuff I nerd about all the time. Like, I love watching bombastic action, especially with the swords. Kagurabachi is like sword porn to the highest degree, and I absolutely love it. But once we get through that little encounter, we start to kind of build up to a bit of a climax with Chihiro, the Masumi, and Iori taking refuge in this hotel that's supposed to be kind of like neutral ground for all types of sorcerers. They're there hiding out, and it leads to it reminds me a lot of scenarios that happen in the John Wick movies. If you remember in the John Wick movies, there's like this hotel where all the assassins go to. But needless to say, like, once the Hishaku show up and they're like, we need to go up and get that girl, things get kind of wild. So this leads to an instance where like our main characters are up at the top floor and they're trying to like work their way down, and then you have the Hishaku down on the bottom, and they're like fighting up through the guards of the hotel. They're fighting their way up towards the top. Just a really fun sequence, especially since this is when we get Hirohiko kind of coming back to the fold after his defeat, and he's pissed. He is ready to prove himself once again. Now, up until this point, I actually haven't really talked about Iori all that much, because I'll admit, like, when she's first introduced and we're like, okay, let's go get Iori, there's not a whole lot of personality to her. She's unfortunately more or less just like a plot device or a MacGuffin, if you will. It's like, okay, everybody's got to go get the girl. All right, let's get the girl. All right, let's go. But once we get to the hotel, things actually slow down a little bit. We start to get more into her character, and I really like what Hokozuna does with her. See, what happens is the Masumi have this plan of, if we reinstate the seal that's on your memories, it'll be a stronger, more permanent way of making sure that you can't remember what's happening and you'll like be further cut off from Samura. And Chihiro he makes a very good point where he's like, hey, hold on. Instead of just forcing her to forget her past and forcing her to be to have no part in this upcoming conflict, why don't we give her the choice, right? Like, let's tell her the truth. And then let her make the decision of whether or not she wants to get involved, or would she prefer to remain neutral and everything. And so we had the Masumi and Chihiro. They're kind of just having this nice discussion with Iori, and we go through a bit of you could say it's a bit of a lore dump, but we do get more information revealed to us about the Seitei War, what originally caused the start of it, with the island of people showing up, them using the metal to create the enchanted blades, and then eventually the enchanted blade wielders kind of pushing back the residents of this island and kind of containing them. which then eventually led to the unfortunate circumstance where Mr. Sword Saint, he pulled a little bit of a genocide. Whoops. Which led to him having to be sealed, to get imprisoned, and then all the Enchanted Blades sealed away, as you do. However, because of this incident, a lot of the sword bearers were given a bad reputation after the war, especially in this case Samura. While there were certainly a number of people that looked at what happened during the war and viewed the sword bearers as heroes who fought for the country and eventually did save them from the invaders, there were also a large number of people that saw a lot of innocents killed by unnecessary force. And for that, a number of the sword bearers were branded as murderers, killers. And all throughout these chapters where we're kind of getting this information revealed to us, I really love the ways depicted of Iori's memories opening up. Like, there's like this image of a lock, and as like more and more of this this lore is revealed to us, you start to see the lock kind of crack, and eventually near the end you see the lock like break all together, and that's when she's like, oh, now I remember everything. Like, honestly, this one singular chapter where all this information is revealed is one of my absolute favorites in the entire series. And that's saying something, because Kagurabachi is one of the rare series where there's like not really a bad chapter. Maybe one or two early on were kind of but like for the most part throughout its entire like 100+ chapter run, it's been consistently good. But like I was saying earlier, we have the scenario where now we're holed up here at the hotel. You have the Hishaku kind of fighting their way up to the top, and now that Iori knows the truth, she's like, oh, all this is happening because of me. And she begins to feel really bad about that. Like, initially Iori's even like, maybe I should just like have the seal restored and just kind of forget all this trauma, all this pain I've gone through. But she realizes that as the people in the hotel are dying, that they may not be people that she know, but they're people that end up fighting because of her, fighting and dying because of her. She even has a friend from the school that shows up to try to save her. She realizes she can't just ignore what's happening. She really needs to step up and take responsibility. So she does end up deciding, yes, I do not want this seal. I want to remember who I am. I'm gonna do something about this conflict. And so we have this like crescendo where Iori, the lock in her memory finally breaks. She grabs a sword and she imitates the fighting style of her father, kind of keeping her eyes closed so she fights blind. And she pulls out the EI White Purity style to fight off some of the goons that are threatening her and her friends. And it's just a really great moment. And even though we have not known Iori for very long, I feel like Hokozuna is so effective in making her likable and kind of having her go through this little bit of a story arc in such a short period of time. It doesn't feel too jarring. I don't know, maybe some of you disagree, but I for one feel like it was a really well accomplished set of chapters. But it's also in the breaking of the seal, we do get even more information about Samura and why he did what he did. A lot of it has to do with the fact that we get the kind of the tragic ending of Iori's mother. So Samura's wife, she ends up getting sick, stuck in the hospital bed, leaving Samura as the only parent that can take care of her, at least for a bit. And the two of them do start to grow a little bit closer. They just start to have a bit of a stronger bond form. But unfortunately, oh dear mama, she is a flashback character. She was not long for this world. But now we're into a situation where Samura loses his wife. He's having to raise Iori on his own, and he has already been ridiculed nonstop for being a murderer from the war. He himself is able to take that, but he realizes now that even his daughter is starting to get bullied at school for his actions, and that's kind of what starts to lead to a crumbling of his character. Yeah, so not wanting his past to continue to negatively affect his daughter, he kind of allows the seal to be put on her memory so that she can be hidden away. He will take the full burden of his past actions, and this is why he ends up wanting to take down the Enchanted Blades. Because in his eyes, even though they were originally labeled as heroes, he begins to believe all the critics. He begins to believe that, yeah, the Enchanted Blade Bears, they were killers, right? They fought to save the country, but they just ended up getting hundreds of thousands of people killed who didn't necessarily need to die. It would be better if we were able to just eliminate all of the Enchanted Blades Bears, cut off those contracts, and then just eliminate the Sword Saint for good so that no one else would have to bear this heavy burden from the war. So naturally, when the Hichaku approached Samura with his proposition, like, hey, help us get the Makatsumi, all right? It kind of works in his favor, because he's like, oh, you're gonna put the key to stopping all the Enchanted Blades in the like one spot. You're gonna round up all the Enchanted Blades and make their identities known. You know, okay. It kind of makes it easy for Samura if he actually wants to cut everything off, you know, stop everything. Now, it is easy for us, the reader, to kind of step back and look at everything and be like, I don't know, man, like, just killing the sword bearers and then eventually killing the Sword Saint so that no one else can use the Enchanted Blades, you know, like, maybe not the best of ideas, especially since we have the context of, you know, Chihiro's breaking Kalad Gorger. We saw what happened there. Like, we know there are other options, but like, just looking at purely from Samura's perspective, you can kind of see why he comes to the conclusion that he does. And it puts him in a position where he's willing to make the ultimate sacrifice of ending his own life so that as few other people have to perish as a result of their past sins. But as we have Iori regaining her memories, we also have Chihiro picking up N10 once again, reforging that contract. We also have our boy Hirohiko taking Yuruha's sword and forming his own bond with it. All this happens around the same time, so instantly Samura, his attention is grabbed, and he's there on the scene, trying to put an end to this Enchanted Blade nonsense. And oh my god, just look at this panel. Look at, this is Samura coming back into the story and being like, all right, I'm here. What a glorious entrance, right? This is like peak Hokuzono aura farming. What am I supposed to say? Now, starting off, we do get a bit of a three-way skirmish between Chihiro, Samura, and Hirohiko. And don't get me wrong, it is fun. And we do dive a little bit into this important element of the Enchanted Blades, which is this idea of the true realm, kind of an awakening of the abilities of the Enchanted Blades, your ability to kind of like morph them and take them even further than they originally were. Cool stuff. I like it. Hirohiko kind of just gets bitch slapped around and then becomes a one-on-one between Chihiro and Samura. That's really that's the main show, right? That's the what everybody came to see. Also, it is important to note that we do get introduced to some of the abilities of Samura's sword, Tobi Mune. Obviously, there was Crow. We've seen Owl, which is his ability to kind of like look across the city, look for different auras and energy signatures. But the big one that we really get introduced to is Suzaku, which is the Phoenix Healing Flames. Right, so this kind of goes full circle. It is an explanation on how Chihiro was able to die and then immediately get revived thanks to Samura's ability. He did intentionally kill Chihiro and revive him so that the contract would break, but he would still remain alive. And so, like, with this kind of revelation, it's like, oh, hold on. Samura, he wasn't really planning on murdering all of the Enchanted Blade wielders necessarily. He always planned to just break that contract and then eventually immediately bring them back, so that it's like, okay, these people that I fought in the war with, these people I'm good friends with, I don't have to kill them. The only one that really has to die, in theory, is the Sword Saint, so that all of the other contracts are null and void, and it's only himself that it has to perish. Now this fight is really interesting because when you really think about it, Samura and Chihiro, they have the same goal, right? They want to prevent another malediction from happening. It's just they have two different approaches on how to accomplish that goal. While it's great that Samura ultimately is not like fully on board with the Hishaku in their goals, he's still taking the path that will lead to himself being sacrificed for the sake of others. But then Chihiro comes in and says, "Hey, I know you didn't know this, but my father made another sword, right? He made Enten. I can break the other enchanted blades. I can break those contracts without affecting the life of other people. There's a way for us to stop another malediction from happening that doesn't involve you dying." Samura, while he is physically blind, I've already covered that. In a lot of ways, he's also blinded by his own ambition, his kind of stubbornness to prove that he is a hero, to prove all the haters wrong. That he almost like refuses to believe that this is a possibility at first. So they do inevitably cross blades, and I gotta say, man, like the two of them fighting, like the way it's paneled, it reminds me a lot of like old Kurosawa films, right? Black and white samurai flicks. The way their standoffs are, the way they posture and pose, ready for battle, super cool stuff. But through perseverance, Chihiro and Iori eventually do manage to kind of get it through his head that, hey, we can work together. There is another option. You don't have to sacrifice yourself, right? You don't have to be the hero, right? We can do this together. We get this like really beautiful moment right at the end where once he kind of accepts his idea of getting aid from others, he uses the Suzaku flames on his eyes to restore his vision so that he can look upon his daughter for the first time in many, many years. And it's such a really beautiful moment. Just a nice cherry on top of an already delicious dessert. And that is a wrap. I'm gonna have a heck of a time editing this video. I've been rambling for more time than I was anticipating, but I hope you guys like this little summary / review of, I guess I'll call it the first half of the Swordbearer assassination arc. It's kind of hard to say because while this conflict with Chihiro and Samura was going on, we did kind of start another portion of the arc where the Kaminabi headquarters is being attacked by Hishaku, and there's a whole bunch of shenanigans going on there, and I'm not even gonna get into the stuff that's happening in the latest chapters. Like as of right now, the newest one is chapter 105. Oh my god. All that's gonna have to be another video for a different time. But so far, this stretch, the one I just talked about today, has been one of my absolute favorites. Honestly, I think I can say it's my favorite stretch of Kagurabachi. Although, like, the newest stuff is very good. It's very, very good. But if you made it this far in the video, I want to give you a big thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. What did you think? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? I don't know. Feel free to share your thoughts about Kagurabachi in the comments below. If you want to hear me talk more about Kagurabachi, feel free to follow me over on Blue Sky. I tweet out about it every once in a while. Also, feel free to hop into the Discord server. I got a whole channel there for Kagurabachi spoilers. So tread cautiously if you are not fully caught up. And okay, I've been here recording long enough. I'm a dip out. Again, thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. In the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful holiday and New Year's. I'll catch you later. Peace.